Saturday, March 25th, 1972, brought a major snowstorm to Montreal. My 13-year-old self didn't know how much additional snow fell, but at 4 feet 8 inches tall, the snow on the sides of the road was taller than me. I wondered what the day would be like, as it was my bar mitzvah. Would anyone show up? Would they be snowed out? What would happen? As it turned out, all but a couple of out-of-towners were able to make it, and my bar mitzvah took place as scheduled. The portion was Parshat Tzav, Shabbat Hagadol, the same portion as we read this Shabbat. Rabbi David Begon reminds us that there are many reasons offered for the custom of calling the Shabbat immediately preceding Passover Shabbat Hagadol, literally the Great Sabbath. Rabbi Jacob ben Asher, known as the Tur for his book Arba Turim, meaning the Four Pillars, explains the name originates from the great miracle that occurred on the Shabbat preceding the departure of the children of Israel from Egypt. On that Shabbat, the Jews were told to take a lamb for the Paschal offering and to tie them to their bedposts. Miraculously, the Egyptians who worshipped the lamb as a god stood by silently as the Israelites slaughtered their deity in preparation for the Paschal Seder meal. A second explanation comes from Rabbi David Abudraham, who writes, in the Haftarah of the Shabbat prior to Pesach, we read the verse from Malachi chapter 3, verse 23, "Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the Yom Hagadol v'Hanorah, the great and awesome day of the Lord." Hence, it is from the Haftarah that the Shabbat gets its name and refers to a time when God will usher in the Messianic redemption, echoing God's redemption of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. Only this time, it will be the redemption from the slavery of this world for the freedom of the Messianic times. Another explanation provided by Rabbi Eliyahu Kitov offers a novel interpretation on this Shabbat. The Jewish people performed their first mitzvah, their first divine commandment, as a nation. By receiving and fulfilling the commandment stated in Exodus chapter 12, verse 3, on the 10th day of this month, they shall take for themselves each man a lamb. The nation entered into the realm of mitzvot, and in essence became a bar mitzvah. Just as a 13-year-old boy is referred to as a gadol, so too this Shabbat is referred to Shabbat Hagadol. Another coming of age for the Jewish people occurs on the night of Passover, when we read the Haggadah and fulfill the positive commandment of telling the story of the Exodus. Unlike other times when we perform mitzvot, such as taking the lulav or lighting the Hanukkah candles, this time no blessing is recited prior to the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Rabbi Moses Schreiber, known as the Chassam Sofer, explains that there is a blessing, but oddly, it is recited at the end of the Haggadah, inconsistent with the principle that blessings are recited before the performance of the mitzvah. Why, he asks, do we not make this blessing before we perform the commandment of retelling the story of the Exodus? He answers his own question and says that when a person converting to Judaism immerses in the waters of the mikveh, the ritual bath, the final stage in the conversion process, he or she has no choice but to make the blessing after he or she has immersed, for a very simple reason. Prior to the immersion, he or she was not yet Jewish. And now, after the immersion, he or she is, and is thus able to recite the blessing. The Haggadah tells us that every year, as a Jew recounts his or her history through the telling of the story of Passover, he or she is obligated to feel as if he or she, him or herself, left Egyptian bondage. Reciting the Haggadah is a 15-step process that starts with the recalling of our lowly origins as idol worshippers and culminates with the glorious Exodus and our entry or conversion into being Jews. To properly relive the entire experience, we must feel as we begin the Haggadah that we are idolatrous, not yet Jews, and are unable to recite the blessing for performing this commandment. Finally, through the process of telling and reliving the story, we reach the climax and connect to God as Jews. Like the emerging convert, we recite the blessing at the end. Rabbi David Begun concludes, our sages teach us that the realities of our physical world are merely a reflection of God's spiritual reality. Thus, the spiritual potential of rebirth and renewal that are inherent to the Jewish month of Nisan explains why the season of spring, heralding the renewal of our physical world, occurs in that month, and why the miracles of the Exodus, the rebirth of our nation, also occur at this time. The time is ripe with potential for commencement and for growth. Let us use it to achieve greatness. Shabbat Shalom.